back, vintage film fans. I'm George, and today we are taking a look at a quirky little B movie from the early 1960s, and it is called Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Now, as you can probably deduce from the title, this is a movie that is based around the book by Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe. If you know anything about classic literature, that's a story about a guy that's shipwrecked on a desert island and has to survive. Well, we're doing the same thing in this movie, only instead of a desert island, it's Mars that he gets shipwrecked on and has to survive. The movie came out in 1964. It was directed by Byron Haskin. It starred Paul Manty and Victor London. The character played by Paul Manty, his name is Kit. He's the Robinson Crusoe type character that is in a space probe flying around Mars, and for reasons that are technical, he has to eject, and he lands on the surface of Mars, and his ship is broken, and he's stuck there. The first half of the movie, in my opinion, is a little bit slower than the second half, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So again, like I said before, the first half of the movie is this character lands on Mars, and he's got to figure out a way to get all these elements he needs to survive. He needs a shelter, he needs heat, he needs food, he needs water, he needs oxygen. And he spends a good chunk of the first act, and even into the second act, basically going after those things. And it takes a little while to get going, and that becomes the plot for really the first half of the movie. And it doesn't start picking up, in my opinion, until the second half of the movie. So what happens in the second half of the movie is he runs into another humanoid character, and this one is played by Victor London. And we find out that he is a race of aliens from Orion's Belt, a planet in Orion's Belt. And there are these aliens and spaceships that for some reason have come to Mars, and they're mining Mars for minerals. And they use the slave labor of some other class of humanoid alien to do the mining work. And then there's a suppressive group that has access to spaceships and laser guns that are forcing them to do the work. And this character Victor London plays escaped being a slave, and then Kit, the Earthman, runs into him. And he gives him the name of Friday, again going back to the Robinson Crusoe mythos from Daniel Defoe's story. He gives him the name Friday, and they become friends. Now, in my opinion, the stuff that comes from when we get to that part of the plot, that second half of the movie where we got Friday and we got the aliens and we got the slaves and he escapes and the adventure stuff, that's when the movie really picks up for me. I enjoy that stuff more than the first half where we got the Kit character trying to survive. And I almost wish that the film had taken the approach of going more into that story as the main plot. I really think that the survival stuff probably should have been relegated to like the first 20 minutes of the movie, and they should have put more time and effort into developing the stuff with Friday and the aliens and all that. I think would have been a little bit more of an interesting adventure story. Now, I will admit, I have never read Daniel Defoe's original work, Robinson Crusoe, and I don't know that source material very well. So it could very well be that the makers of this film were trying their best to follow that story, and so that could be why they put so much emphasis in the first half on the survival stuff. But for my money, I like the second half better. So I guess my point is, if you decide to watch this film and you get into it and you're kind of thinking the survival stuff is feeling a little tedious, hang in there until the second part of the movie, and that's where a little bit more of the fun comes in my opinion. The interaction between Kit and Friday, the alien spaceships, the lasers shooting down on the planet, they're hunting them. That's when I think the movie picks up and actually becomes more interesting. All right, so this is the part of the video where I talk about some trivia things, and to do that, as always, we got the clipboard of creeps here, so let's see what the clipboard has for us. So the first one is Paul Manti and Victor London were both convinced that the fine work they did on this ambitious and imaginative film would provide a substantial boost to their careers. However, the lackluster distribution that Paramount Studios gave the film, along with the poor box office returns, actually caused both actors to have career setbacks. And Paul Manti, in fact, he said that he didn't work again as an actor for 11 months after making this film. So it's not the first time in Hollywood that an actor took on a movie thinking it was going to lead to great things and it actually didn't. But that's what happened in the case of Victor London and Paul Manti. So there's that. But there is a caveat to that. And Paul Manti was aware that Victor London originally wanted the starring role that he played. But during the production, the two men became close friends. And they respected each other greatly. And Manti speaks very highly of Lunding's acting abilities. So they didn't get a great boost to their careers, but they formed a good friendship because of this movie. So at least they got something out of it on that front, which is pretty cool. Now the other thing I'd like to talk about is, as I mentioned before, this movie was directed by Byron Haskin. Now he also directed another film that we're familiar with, the 1953 War of the Worlds. We've also covered that movie here on this channel, so when you're done with this video, head over there and check that review out. But Byron Haskin directed this film as well. And the spaceships that you see in this film that the aliens use to fly in and out, they are the same spaceships that are used in War of the Worlds. They're the same design. Byron Haskin just reused them for this movie. And I think that's really cool. If you check out that other video, you'll know that I'm a big fan of that movie, and I like the design of those aliens, and it's cool that we get to see them here in another movie that features Mars. And the spaceships in this film are one of my favorite parts. They zip in and out. They're really neat. They go zip, zip, and they got these laser cannons, and they're kind of a menacing force in the film. And it's cool that we get the same design from War of the Worlds that is used in this movie. I like that. That's pretty neat. Okay, so that brings me back to my final thoughts. Again, I will rehash the idea that I feel the science of this movie, looking at it from a 21st century perspective, is just something that you have to accept, even though we know it's not realistic. And the funny thing about that is the poster and the trailer go out of their way to say that the science in this movie is authentic. They make that claim in the marketing of this movie. Now again, this is 1964, so they had a different take on it back then, but it's funny to me that they actually make that claim in the marketing, and we know today that that's not the case. I also do want to throw a shout out to Adam West, TV's Batman, 1960s Batman. He is in this film briefly. You'll see him in the beginning of the movie mostly. And this was a couple of years before the Batman TV show premiered, so it's an earlier role for him. It's kind of cool to see him in this movie. He's not in it very long, but he's there, so that's a plus. And I do like the monkey character that they have in the film. And the monkey's name is Mona. And she is like a sidekick character to Paul Manti's character. Some kind of a version of a companion for him before he meets Friday. And I like the monkey. It's a monkey. Who doesn't like monkeys? Okay, so that is our movie for this week. Robinson Crusoe on Mars. I think it's definitely worth a watch. If you're not loving it right when you start, like again, I said, stick in there. It gets better as it gets along. It gets better toward the end. And again, I do recommend checking out the Blu-ray version. They did a great transfer. It looks really good on Blu-ray. So that's our film. We're going to be doing some more coming up soon, and I hope you tune in for those when we get them out there. Till then, I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.